Thanks for joining Just Us Chatting. I'm Tamara.
And I'm Michael. And today we wanted to talk about something that Jordan Peterson shared just recently, although the original interview was from June or July? June of last year. So he has, I guess, kind of decided that he wasn't going to respond to hit pieces unless they were getting a significant amount of traction or they were put forth by other academics. And so apparently he put together a letter and sent it to this particular academic. And well, let me start there. There was a woman who was a feminist philosopher who is at Cornell. Her name is, let me see if I can find this here. Her name is Kate Mann. And so she was interviewed by Sean Illing at Vox back in June. It looks like they published this. And he sent her a letter to make some clarifications, and he hasn't heard anything back yet. So he finally wrote up his letter, posted his letter and additional clarifications, and then posted that along with the article. So this is an older kind of takedown of Jordan Peterson from June of last year, but I hadn't read it yet, and Peterson just shared something about it, so I'll go ahead and take a look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
First time reading it. I mean,
First time reading it.
Briefly looked at the beginning part, but we figured we'd read it on camera and talk about it as we
go.
As we hear about it,
so we'll
what
just
she's saying.
Go through this with you. It's our first time looking at it. So here we go. Feminist philosopher makes the case against Jordan Peterson. Peterson sounds like a stereotypical postmodernist. In my entire adult life, I don't think I've seen anything quite like the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. In less than 2 years, the Canadian psychology professor emerged from obscurity to become an international best-selling author with a massive online following. In the process, he morphed into a self-help guru of sorts, railing against identity politics and dispensing tough advice to mostly young alienated men. Peterson, well, okay.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Peterson has stirred up a ton of controversy, particularly on the left, but I find him oddly fascinating, even though I think he gets some important things terribly wrong. For example, he seems to think that just because social hierarchies are natural, they must therefore be desirable or just. That's an old fallacy in the philosophical world, and Peterson appears to commit it regularly.
He doesn't say that hierarchies, just because they're natural, are just.
No, I don't think so either. I don't agree with that. I think that what he talks about is the fact that hierarchies tend towards tyranny.
Right. That you actually have to be careful. He says that all the time. Yeah.
That hierarchies tend towards tyranny, and that you need the logos, the power of the individual, to point out the corruption. Right. And seek to rectify that. Yeah. And to make that. Yeah. I mean, like his point is that the hierarchy is constantly in need of updating and repair. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? Because it's
he doesn't act as if it's desirable or just. I don't know.
No.
So often. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so maybe they're saying that, like, maybe they are trying to make the case that, hierarchies, just by the fact that they're hierarchical, is
bad
is unjust.
Or something.
That's stupid. That's just dumb.
Yeah.
Like, because it reduces hierarchies to some sort of it reduces all hierarchies of value to some sort of injustice. Mm-hmm. It's like competence. You play sports and somebody scores a lot of points, that makes them somehow oppressive.
Right.
Right.
It's like maybe they actually worked harder than you to get to that level of
maybe they won. Maybe they did something, and they succeeded. And okay, so how is that and oppression.
Yeah.
It's not, right? It's like, just because somebody is good at something doesn't mean that they're oppressing someone else.
I mean, even if they have like a natural talent, or like some people do seem to have like a natural proclivity towards something and a natural ability to, and you know, and then it's coupled though with like a tendency towards practice. But even if someone has a natural talent at something, it's like they're not oppressing you with it, you know,
exactly.
Like, sorry that you weren't, you know, born with that talent.
Right.
But
so yeah, I mean, the idea that hierarchies are like outright oppressive is stupid. So if that's the case that he's making, that like, you know, just because it's, you know, a hierarchy is natural doesn't mean that it's just. Well, yeah, but just because a hierarchy exists doesn't mean it's unjust either.
Exactly.
Like, that's a stupid, fallacious, reductive argument. It's really dumb.
We should keep going, but I had to point that out, that people misrepresent what Peterson says all the time, and that is just a blatant example.
So he's never, you know,
he's never acted as if hierarchies are just
hierarchies
because
are
they
great,
exist.
You know? Like, well, I mean, they do exist, and it's not that. The other thing is, it's not that they're just. It's that they're a fact of life.
Right,
you have to deal with them.
Right. You can't get rid of hierarchies no matter how you try.
Hierarchy exists in the moment you decide to do something instead of something else. You've created a hierarchy.
Right.
You
Might
created
be a hierarchy of value,
right?
Yeah.
You've said, this is more valuable to do than that. That's hierarchy.
Right.
It's there. It's built into the structure of your being.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not always the same thing that has this, you know, the highest value, which is why he says it has to be constantly updated, right?
Right.
Sometimes you need sleep more than you need food. Sometimes you need food more than you need sleep. Sometimes you need water. Sometimes you need to go to the bathroom. There are things that motivate you and they have value, and they're more important at different times, right? So it's not always the same things that are
at the top of the hierarchy.
At the top of the hierarchy, right? It's not always the same things. And this is a thing that's true in financial hierarchies too, because it's not always the same company that's like at the top of the hierarchy. Like 20 years ago, Google wasn't at the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
They just weren't.
Right.
Like they barely exist. Like I don't even know if they existed 20 years ago.
I don't know if they did either.
What was I?
It was like 1999.
Yeah, I think they existed, but man, they were like nowhere.
Right.
They barely existed at all.
Right. Hierarchies change.
What's valuable in the world changes based on the things that have come before. It's progress. Like new stuff happens, there's things in the world, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, look what's really valuable now. Access to information.
Yeah.
Well, that revolutionized the internet.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, guess what's really valuable now? Access to goods. And now Amazon is like, Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like these... It's paradigmatic, you know. It's like the shifting nature of what's most, you know, kind of valuable in the set of hierarchies constantly fluctuates and changes. So
exactly.
The other thing is, it's not like there's one, you know, hierarchy that everyone has to exist within.
Right.
There's almost an infinite number of hierarchies that we can, you know, work to inhabit. And
I think we should get back to the interview / article.
You're right. It's going to take us forever if we keep doing
We're
this.
never going to get through this.
So let's go. There we go.
Do you want me to read?
Please,
Where are we?
nevertheless.
Where are we? Nevertheless, compared to most of the gas bags filling up our collective headspace, Peterson is reliably smart and interesting. I've tried to interview him twice now, but he's declined both times. So I reached out to Kate Mann, a professor of philosophy at Cornell University and the author of Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny. Mann recently reviewed Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, and unlike many Peterson critics, actively engaged with his ideas. Over the course of our discussion, we talked about what Peterson gets wrong and why his audience is overwhelmingly white, straight, and male, and we analyzed some of the strangest passages from his new book. Mann argues that Peterson's appeal among young white men has to do with the undeniable progress that has been made in extending opportunities to a wider range of people, which leads to more competition in areas they often expected and sometimes felt entitled to dominate.
Okay, I have to stop talking about that for a second. This is such a common like idea on the left that men don't feel entitled to things. Yeah. Men are fully aware that we have to compete for everything we want.
Yeah.
We're fully aware of that. We're trained in that from the very beginning. We don't feel entitled, right, to spaces on boards and, you know, spots in the CEO or the legislature or anything like that. There's no entitlement.
Yeah.
Okay, this idea that white people or white men feel entitled to stuff is stupid. It's so stupid. Like, we're totally aware that we have to compete with other people. And, okay, now it's, you know, now since the 60s, it includes people of other colors and genders. Like, that's not a big deal. It's really not.
Yeah. It's just there's more people to compete with to get to those spots.
It's still the same game.
Yeah.
We're still playing the same game.
Yeah.
And we don't... It's not like...
It's not that you feel entitled. It's that lots of men want to be in positions where they're making good money or, you know, well, yeah, predominantly that they're making enough money so that they can find a good mate. You know what I mean? It's not that they feel entitled. It's just that they want, not all men even, not even all men want to compete and get to a high level of income.
No,
but
that's
lots of men do. But lots of men do. But then lots of men don't. You know what I mean? It's like we all have our different values. There's plenty of guys these days that are like, you know what? If I can't find a woman who will love me even if I'm only making 30 grand a year, then screw it. I'll just be on my own.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's about entitlement. I don't think it's
it's a silly idea. This
I mean, Jesus.
This idea that men feel, oh yeah, well now there's, I mean, if you want to say that there's greater economic pressure on people, okay, sure, right? I don't think that is making straight white men any, you know, particularly kind of angry.
Yeah.
I'm 38. All the people I know my age grew up in an integrated society. We're happy with that. We're not looking to like get rid of any other race of people. We're not looking to put women back in the kitchen. You know, we're not. That's not the thing. It's not it. Right? It's just not that. The problem is everywhere. The real problem, if anyone gives a shit, is that everywhere we look, right? Like I was born in 1980. All right, I was born in 1980.
You wanna come on?
I don't know how I'm still getting blamed for slavery.
Come on. Oh, I know, right?
I don't know how I'm still getting blamed for all of this stuff, and I don't know why it's okay. I don't know why it's okay to, you know, to have hashtags like "kill all men," right?
I know.
Or you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
Yeah. It's like it's somehow
the whole intersectional kind of. It's not intersectionality as a theory. It's intersectionality as like a cultural kind of framework, right? For stupid people to use as a cudgel, right? That's really how it ends up being used on the street, right? In populist movements, it's not a sophisticated thing. Yeah. It's white man bad. You know, it's white straight person evil. Yeah. That's all it is, and that's what it gets reduced to. That's how it gets used.
Yeah.
That's what the actual that's what actually comes of that. Right? And so when you take that kind of divisive ideology, right, that says people who are marginalized have special ways of understanding the world that aren't available to other people, right, then you kind of naturally make them more valuable.
Yeah. And
you, by consequence, naturally make the people at the bottom of the oppression Olympics, the straight white men, you make them naturally less valuable. Yeah. And that shit gets dangerous because you're talking about assigning like differences of value to groups based on immutable characteristics.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we fought against. What my parents generation, right, and my grandparents fought against. That's something that we shouldn't be doing anymore.
No kidding. It's like you can't criticize anyone unless they're straight, white, male, or, you know, you can criticize white women as well, but the people that can be criticized the most and to an extreme level that is dangerous are like white men. Specifically cis heterosexual.
Everywhere we look, it's like if you watch a movie, you've got like every movie that comes out, you've got to have some woman who can kick a dude's ass.
Yeah.
Like it just has to be there. Like it's kind of obligatory now. There's got to be a woman who like punches some guy.
Yeah, knocks them out. Like someone my size, you know, can punch out a guy like your size or even bigger.
I'm 250, whatever. I'm heavy.
Yeah. Right? Like
I'm a big dude, and this little 130-pound girl is supposed to knock me out.
I really don't think I could knock a guy out your size.
No, I don't think so either.
I could probably hurt your jaw, but
sure. But I mean, just the cultural messages that we're getting everywhere. Yeah. Now we're getting them from major corporations like Gillette, and we're seeing them in movies. It's like this feminist narrative is all over the place, and now it's getting now it's turning intersectional too. Yeah. You know, and it's like
it's laughable, really. First of all, I mean, why is it okay? Like, it's almost in shows and movies, they show women punching out men, and, you know, it's funny. Yeah. And it's okay. It's like, oh, yeah, look at her kick his ass, you know?
Go, girl. Girl power.
Yet...
It's just that you have to have... You basically... It's demonization. It's broad-scale cultural demonization. Yeah. You know, and it wasn't okay, you know, when it was minstrels, you know, and it was blackface, and it was, you know, dehumanizing and reducing black people to stupid caricatures. And it's not okay when they're doing it to white people either. It's not okay when they're doing it to white straight men. Yeah. Right? It's just not. It's just wrong. You shouldn't do that to people. You shouldn't reduce people, right? Individuals.
To characteristics that they can't control. Right. They were born with.
Like, and not just that, but you take the worst aspects, right? You take this is the really insidious part. It's like, okay, you want to have a stereotype. There's positive and negative stereotypes. Okay, you could say Asian people are smart. Well, that's kind of a positive stereotype. Oh, Asian people are really good with computers. They're really smart. This is kind of a positive stereotype. Obviously, it's not true of everyone. Right. Okay? But it's not like a negative stereotype. Right. Right? When you take negative stereotypes, right, and then you kind of say, you know, like, ugh, you know, white men, because they're all that way, right? And you just kind of make negative... when you start taking people... Like, positive stereotypes are one thing. Negative stereotypes are a totally different thing. When you start reducing groups of people to their negative stereotypes, right, you're in dangerous territory, and it's not okay. Yeah. It's not okay. We shouldn't be doing that to anybody. No. No. So. But
let's keep on with this.
I had to stop because this idea that like it's just, to me, it's evil. Yeah. Right? This idea that men, you know, especially straight white men, expected and sometimes feel entitled to dominate. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's just fucking evil. Yeah. That's an evil view of men. Yeah. It's an evil view specifically of straight white men.
It's prolific in this day and age.
It's absolutely prolific. It's an evil demonization. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah. To be like spreading that like it's fact. Yeah. I mean, like, you could not say that about any other group of people and get away with it. No. And the only reason you can get away with saying it about, you know, straight white men is because we've got this intersectional idea that it's okay to punch up. I'm sorry, it's not okay to punch. Let's stop punching. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Let's talk and get along. Right. It makes me mad.
I know.
All right.
Reach, so.
A lightly edited transcript of our conversation follows. So here's Sean talking with Kate Mann. Sean's the author of the article, the Vox contributor. And Kate Mann is the, I think, associate professor. Let me see. Anyway, she's the feminist philosopher. Peterson has this recurring interest in identifying social hierarchies, which resonates with people who think they're in danger of losing their privileged position or are resentful about having lost it.
Oh my God.
This is something you really hone in on in your review of his book.
Let's try to get through like a few little bits.
So we just had that conversation, obviously.
Yeah.
And, I guess if you're just operating within that framework as if that's just true, then the rest of this conversation can happen and make sense.
Yeah.
But, if you question that premise that that his work resonates with people who feel like they're in danger of losing their privileged position, it's like, Jesus, this is so stupid.
It's so... Oh
it's so ideologically retarded.
Yeah,
this is just dumb.
Thinking. Yeah. All right.
How can you be that stupid? It's hard, right? You've got to work at being that stupid. God.
I don't know how much of this we're going to go through.
I don't think we can get through too much of this.
If all of it is
this silly,
ideologically possessed, like...
So her response. Yeah, it's striking. There's an interesting moment in the book where Peterson talks about resentment as a revelatory emotion that can mean one of two things. One, you feel it because you're immature, in which case you just need to buck up. Or two, you feel resentment because you really are being oppressed or taken advantage of somehow. Your resentment shows that something needs to change or that you need to assert yourself in relation to other people. But there's clearly a third possibility. People often feel resentful because they appear, based on historically entrenched social norms, to be getting a bad bargain.
When what's actually happening is that others are getting a somewhat fairer deal. When you're accustomed to unjust privilege, equality feels like oppression, as the saying goes.
Oh, God. Oh.
Some people are getting a fairer deal.
Right. So because me as a white person, because I'm used to being this, privileged person who gets to just shit all over black people and, make Mexicans do yard work for me and all this other shit. Right? I'm this horrible, person who's used to just stepping on everyone, putting my fucking foot on the back of their head because I'm that guy. When I'm not allowed to step on other people, I feel like I'm being oppressed.
So you're resentful about
I'm resentful about the fact that I can't put my foot on the back of other people's faces anymore. That's what this is saying.
Oh my God.
How shitty of a person do you have to be to think that that's really the problem? To really think that's the case about the vast majority of white men. Right? To think that that's the problem with that's what white men are angry about. It's not that, obviously it's not that people are constantly talking shit about us and we're allowed to be shit on in the public and in media without any kind of consequences. Nobody cares.
Right. You can get beat up by your spouse or partner and get arrested yourself because, women don't abuse.
She broke a nail while she was hitting you in the face.
Yeah.
Right?
Or, so she hurt herself when she was trying to punch you.
Right? Like, these ideas are okay. Really, that's you have to understand what she's saying there. This is a common saying, and it's sad that it's so common, right? When you're accustomed to unjust privilege, right? Equality feels like oppression. Okay. So what does that mean? That means literally they think that most white people, white straight men, right, in general, have a resentment, just kind of this like underlying resentment about the fact that they can't be stepping on the backs of black people and women. That's what they think that we're evil.
That somehow because we have a more equal playing field these days, that men are upset about that.
Right.
That men are upset that, women are going out for the same positions.
Right.
And
so the baseline there is we're bad human beings. Right? Because we wouldn't be resentful if we, like
if you actually wanted women and black people to succeed.
You have to be you have to be a morally bad person, right? To feel oppressed by the fact that you can't oppress people. That's what the claim is, right? Let's get all the rhetoric out of the way. They're claiming that I'm evil. It's a claim that we're evil. Because you can't be a good person and feel like you're somehow disadvantaged by other people having an equal shot. That's reprehensible.
Yeah.
They're literally saying that we're bad people. And that's the problem. I mean, this is terrible.
I mean, she's completely wrong about why many men are feeling either resentful or they're feeling hurt, they're feeling abandoned, they're feeling like they don't matter. They're feeling like they're disposable. I mean, she's completely wrong about why men are... I mean, men are not the only ones that are feeling drawn to Peterson's work.
Yeah.
But she's completely wrong about why men, and obviously all the men that are interested in Peterson, they all have their own reasons for being drawn to his work. Yep. It's not like they're all drawn there for the same reason. Mm-hmm. But I have a feeling that a big part of it is because men feel like they are disposable. They feel like they're not cared about anymore. In fact, it's worse than that. They feel like they are hated. They feel like they are like considered the scum of the earth by women, by feminists, by, intersectionalists, all these people. Yeah. And so the fact that Peterson is like, hey, you know what? Take responsibility for your life. We're all oppressed in different ways. We all have, crappy lives in different ways. Like, we all have varying levels of oppression. But take responsibility for your life. Get your shit in order. Mm-hmm. Kind of...
Well, he kind of revitalizes the hero story, right? The idea that there's something good about masculinity and being courageous.
Exactly, that too.
So the real reason that Peterson is, resonating so strongly with men, mm-hmm. right,
is because he's actually saying like, hey, it's positive.
Right. You can be a man and be good, and there's good things about being a man.
Yes.
Right? And that the idea that you are by default a part of some sort of system of oppression mm-hmm. because of your gender is bullshit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the fact that he says, hey, look, just because you're a man doesn't mean you're a piece of shit.
Right.
And there's good things about being a man, and you mm-hmm. should embody those. Right. And you should be a good man.
Yes.
Right?
And work on getting better and better.
And work on being
we
better
all
and better.
Have our areas that we can get better. We all have our areas where we need a little work.
Right? And this is like what everyone seems to miss is that he's like the only voice actually saying men can be good. Mm-hmm. It's like, imagine that.
And you don't have to get rid of your masculinity to be good.
Yeah.
You can embody masculinity in a positive, healthy, heroic light.
Right. It's not, I mean, because the vast majority of media and culture is drenched in in feminism, mm-hmm. and we're getting, this feminist ideology jammed down our throats all the time about how men are basically, either bumbling idiots who mm-hmm. need a woman to take care of them, mm-hmm. or
shitty misogynists
who are basically just rapists in waiting.
Yeah, or they're just, like they're cheating on their spouse all the time, and
there's horrible sex maniacs and troglodytes. It's just, there aren't any good men in media anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not many of the narratives that are coming up.
And I mean, it's weird, like, because I watch some of these shows that are out in this day and age, like, and there are men that embody honor and embody goodness, but they're not quite as good as the female characters. Like, Blacklist is one that came to my mind. Mm-hmm. Like, Cooper, the head guy, like, he's a good guy and he's an honorable guy, and, so are the other guys in the show, but they're not quite as good or quite as cool as the women. It's like the women have to be like a step above. And I've noticed this again and again in shows and current movies where it's like, everywhere. Even if the men are good, or, most of the men are good, they're not quite as good. And they're a little dopey, or they're, a little, like there's something off with them. They're not quite as good as the women.
Right.
So it's like
this is the narrative that we're just that we're just running with in
this
pretty
is
much
the new equality.
Right.
So.
It's so it's not equality. It's not egalitarian. It's supremacy.
Yeah.
And it's that's basically what white straight men and men in general are kind of angry about. It's not like, oh, I feel like I've never felt entitled to a CEO position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like, these kinds of ideas, like, oh, I feel entitled to what?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do I don't feel entitled to anything except fair treatment.
Right.
Like I feel entitled to equality.
Yeah. And like the freedom to work towards your dreams, the freedom to make a living, the freedom to make a business.
I have that.
Yeah.
Right? I have that freedom, right? And and I'm not saying like I feel entitled to that and I don't have it. I feel I feel entitled to equality, okay? What I don't appreciate is being shit on everywhere I look in culture.
Yeah.
I don't think that's cool.
No.
I wouldn't put up with it if it was every time I turned on a new TV show, there was a black character who was like, yes, sir, master, yes, sir. I wouldn't put up. I'd be like, that's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
That's offensive. It's racist.
Yes.
Right? I wouldn't put up with that. I'd be like, I'd be outraged by that. But every time I turn on a new TV show, there's some bumbling moron of a dude who's like, I can't even pull up my own underwear. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
And he's just like dancing around like this like giant man baby.
Well, I mean, we've been watching Parks and Recreation.
It's everywhere. It's been that way for a long time.
There's only one of the guys is a complete bumbling idiot.
I know, but it's been this way for a long time, right? Like, men have been a joke since at least since The Simpsons back in the 80s. Yeah, Homer is the classic retarded father.
Him and his son are
They're
not
morons.
very bright. The mom and the daughter are incredibly intelligent.
Right? It's been happening for my whole life. I've been seeing this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like these kinds of caricatures of men that are like deeply unflattering, and the dynamic in all of the narratives tends to be women are stupid, men are smart, right? Like there's a whole line of kind of what do you call them, novelty products out there that boys are stupid, throw rocks at them.
Oh yeah,
like on mugs and T-shirts and backpacks and all that stuff. Which is like you can't you can't you can't do that.
No.
That's wrong to do to people.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? But just, newsflash, white straight men are people. Like, okay, so we're included in the group of people that it's wrong to talk that way about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's wrong with that? How is that so hard to understand? Yeah. Right? we've been putting up with this for decades now, and the fact that people can't open their eyes enough to empathize and recognize that that's actually what people are mad about, instead of this idea that I feel somehow entitled to some kind of position of power and privilege. Like, that's just so...
How about you just would like, some respect as being a human being? You know what I mean? Like, you'd like for people to take you as an individual and not characterize you in a group of people where I'm sure there are some men that are horrible human beings, but there's also some women that are horrible human beings. So, let's not characterize people by the group that they supposedly are a part of. Let's take people as individuals and judge them by their individual actions.
Yeah, well,
and not just...
Let's stop like negatively stereotyping groups of people.
Yes.
Right? That was the real kind of cultural drive of, the civil rights movement. Yeah. Was, I don't think that there's really a problem with the idea that, if you say, like I said, Asian people are good at math.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay,
The positive stereotypes.
Obviously that's not true of everyone, but if
Right.
you make, positive assumptions about groups of people, it's not as harmful as if you make negative assumptions about groups of people. So if we could just stop negatively characterizing groups of people, okay?
Yeah.
That'd be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think it's okay to negatively characterize Muslims. I don't think it's okay to negatively characterize black people or Hispanics or women. Right? I don't think it's okay to negatively stereotype people.
Exactly. So
if we could just maybe, like, expand that idea to include straight white men,
that'd be great.
We'd be, pretty much fine.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Let's keep going with this so we can get to Peterson's response.
I don't know if we're going to.
I mean, we don't even have...
So Sean says, what do you think is the biggest mistake, moral, philosophical, or otherwise, that Peterson makes in the book? Yes, what do you think is the biggest mistake that he makes in the book? His idea in chapter 6 of his book that what leads to mass shootings in general and school shootings in particular is a kind of ahistorical... What are you doing, Morphe?
Trying to move.
You're going to get hurt because I'm going to end up hurting your tail leaning against you like this, I think. You okay?
You all right, boo?
All right. His idea in chapter 6, this is his biggest problem, I guess, or his biggest fallacy, biggest mistake. His idea in chapter 6 of his book that what leads to mass shootings in general and school shootings in particular is a kind of ahistorical existential angst or a crisis of being, that's the phrase he uses, about the despair and misery and suffering of human beings. Peterson thereby takes on a huge burden of explaining why white women, people of color, non-binary folks, and so on, almost never act on our existential angst and despair in this way, because, as you know, the vast majority of school shooters have been white men. That's true. I also think the way Peterson cherry-picked the few more dignified sounding sentences from the diary of one of the Columbine killers, Eric Harris, was downright dishonest. As I wrote in my review, he failed to mention the fact that the majority of Harris's diary was virulently, I have a hard time with that word, virulently racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and ableist screed. Okay. Well, I mean...
He failed to mention the fact
that... I mean, I don't know what you... Okay, so Harris, like many other mass killers, was obsessed with the very hierarchies whose importance or validity Peterson never really challenges or offers an alternative to. So, I don't know what you what you expect from someone who is like, it seems pretty obvious to me that someone who's like falling into nihilism is going, because people need to like retain some sense of self. Like the self fractionates, right? And as we get more and more distraught and depressed, our being fractionates, right? And we're like, okay, well, I mean, this is the problem with intersectionality. We don't want to fractionate people into their group identities. Right? We don't want to fractionate people into parts like that. Right? We want to say, okay, well, this is a whole human being, and we want to take into consideration
their upbringing, like his particular experiences growing up. Now, you know what I mean?
Now, if he's falling apart, right? This person is like, if he's falling apart as a human being, and he's diving into resentment and hatred, well, it's the way that the ego works is you pick something that you're not, and you make that a demon. Right? That's how people reinforce their self-identity.
So like basically starting to think that all the people around him were horrible, bad people.
Right.
Maybe because they didn't see his pain or something.
You just take, okay, so just the basic way that the kind of, okay, this is like from kind of more of an Eastern metaphysical tradition, but the idea that the ego or the sense of self, right, is basically just a collection of labels that we stick on ourselves. This is one of the other reasons that I have a big problem with the identitarian stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not real.
Yeah.
There's nothing real about your identities. You know, they're just labels. They're so transient and stupid to like label yourself in these ways. And I mean, okay, categories are useful, but anyway, it's not the fundamental truth of your being. There's a individual there. There's a person there. So, this idea that the way that the sense of self, if you're fractionating, you're falling apart, you're struggling, you're not able to maintain a stable sense of identity. One of the things that you do to try and maintain a sense of identity, and you can look around and see this in your own life. You'll see it everywhere you look. Everyone you know, there's somebody cutting people down. Right? They're cutting other people down. And what they're actually doing when they're saying that, when they're doing that, right? It's never like, it's almost never somebody who's cutting themselves down.
Because they're trying to build themselves up by cutting others down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? The whole point is to make something else worse, because if it's below me, then I'm higher than it. And so that's like this psychological trick we play on ourselves to try and build ourselves up.
Yeah.
Right? So if a person is collapsing, right? If their psychology is collapsing, it makes perfect sense that a white person whose psychology is collapsing would be like, screw black people and screw all those other, brown people of various
women
colors,
that have
and women
rejected
because he's a man,
me
right? So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That would be a hallmark of someone who's collapsing psychologically, right?
Yeah.
So
what the thing is, like,
the other thing is, okay, this is kind of a spiral dynamics kind of thing. There's a couple of pieces here. Men tend to be more violent, right? The distribution's flatter, so men tend to be the ones who are. There tend to be more men who are not well socialized, and more men who are hyper socialized and hyper successful. It's kind of like this, right? So there's lots of men who. That's why majority of men are in prison, right? You get the hyper aggressive people, right?
Yeah.
And so there's those people who are hyper aggressive and they never get well socialized and they're in jail. And they're, but the majority of them are men.
Right.
But also you get the other thing, which is you got hyper aggressive people who become well socialized, and what they actually do is become extremely focused and assertive and directed, and they
motivated.
They transmute that all into
to positive characteristics,
into success, basically.
Yeah.
Right, and they don't hurt people; they help people, and they do great things in the world. So, but those tend to also be men.
Right.
Now, so you do have more violence among men. That's one thing. Then there's a socioeconomic factor. I think the reason, and this is the reason that most of the shooters or mass shooters are straight white men, which is not the case for all of the shooters.
No.
We had San Bernardino, and we had the nightclub in.
Right, they're not all white.
Right, they're not all white.
They are predominantly men.
They're almost all men, and there was a woman who went into, I think, YouTube and started shooting people at YouTube.
Oh yeah. And sometimes there's like duos,
but it's
like
rare.
Male and female teams.
Right, but it's very rare. It is mostly white men now, and young white men.
They've also mostly all been on psychotropic.
That's another thing.
Drugs.
Almost exclusively, these school shooters are on psych meds.
And so it's like, which came first?
Right.
Were they already? Well, that's a whole nother thing. I'll let you keep going. Sorry.
Okay, so let's look at a couple socioeconomic factors here.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot more middle class white guys. Right. And so these kids in middle class families going to school they have more space for existential angst. If you're struggling to survive, right, you need to, make sure that your mom is working 2 jobs, your dad's nowhere to be found, you're living on the south side of Chicago, and you've got to make sure that your little sisters are up and dressed, and you need to get them to school because your mom had to leave for work so that she could catch an early shift. And that's your normal life. You're like 8 years old and you're already parenting. You don't have time to have existential angst. You just have to do. You have
to make sure there's food and that you're clothed and like you have the basic necessities.
You don't have time to sit there and meditate on your own misery. You just have to fucking get shit done. You know what I mean? And that's one of the reasons that you don't see, even amongst people who are, you have gang members, right? And gang violence isn't the same kind of violence.
No.
It's not like it's not somebody snapping and trying to take out everyone.
Right. It's violence based on like turf wars and stuff like that.
Right? It's a functional form of violence. It's with a point that is not existential.
Right.
The shooting of innocent people at a school is definitely the attempt to make some sort of existential point.
Right.
It's like there's
that being itself is like non-beneficial.
I'm gonna destroy everything. And the very idea that there might be some sort of method to the madness is itself a lie. And you should. That's kind of the point, right? Is like and that's why it's like an assault on God, right? The idea that there's a method to all of this madness is itself a lie, and I'll prove it. Watch, I'm just going to kill a bunch of innocent kids. Right? Yeah. That's the problem. Right? That's the point they're trying to make, is that there is no point.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to make the point that none of it matters.
Right.
That it's completely, that it's all bullshit.
Right.
It's all a lie.
Yeah.
And so I think that his assessment there is.
Yeah, so I think that's what he was trying to point out. Like, whatever quote he used, I don't remember the quote, but it's like he wasn't actively trying to leave out these aspects of this kid's diary. He just was like, he had a certain quote that he wanted to put in that exemplified.
Well, and that's the thing. Of course, she would look at that and go, well, see, look, he's a misogynist and he's a racist and stuff. And I say, well, to me, it's like there's a developmental nature to this stuff, right? Where as your wholeness disintegrates, you break down into ethnocentrism.
He just hated life and everything in existence, basically.
Right.
I think there's a fox.
And when you're struggling to prove that you're the only thing that's, or that there's something good about you, that's what people resort to when your wholeness is collapsing and you're fragmenting, you're turning. Anything that you're not becomes the enemy, the bad thing, and you just kind of shit on that so that you're taller than it.
Although,
that's all.
I feel like there's probably quite a bit of self-hatred, self-loathing amongst people that wanna. But there's a certain. They try to make themselves feel better by putting all their hatred on everything else, everything and everyone else.
Right.
But it stems from an extreme self-loathing that is hard to deal with.
Yeah.
So that's why they push it out onto everything else.
Right.
And I mean, that's why a lot of these guys end up killing themselves too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it this way. If you think that you are, if you really think that you're garbage, right? If you really think that you're a horrible person, right? It's a self-defense mechanism to point at other people and be like, that's garbage too.
Exactly.
Screw that guy.
That's what I'm saying.
Screw those people.
To put some of it like elsewhere.
To find the faults in everything else.
Right.
Because you can see it in yourself
and you go, man,
I'm terrible,
like
right?
That,
So if you're looking at yourself all the time going, I'm just this bag of garbage.
Right.
Right? Then you look out there at the world and, it's a self-defense mechanism.
Exactly.
You go, well, at least that's a bag of garbage too, and so is that.
Right.
And that's, a pile of shit, and that's a horrible thing.
Right.
And you just find all the garbage.
Right.
Right? And then you assign it, and you go, look, you know, that group of people are bad, and you know, women are bad, and this race is bad, and you just it's a self-defense mechanism when you're falling apart. You know what I mean? We live in a society where we're past ethnocentrism by and large, right? And so most people get that, we're kind of enculturated into them. We're at a point where most people have ethnocentrism enculturated out of them because of the society that we live in. You know, or at least a kind of pathological ethnocentrism, right? Most people still have sexual preference and stuff like this, or you know, remnants that are, but the vast majority of the like real pathologies of ethnocentrism are enculturated out of most people, and we don't think of it as like, but if you feel like you're not a good person, or you can't get anywhere, you can't, you know, everybody hates you, and everyone's telling you that you're bad for whatever reason. If this is what you feel like, you start to kind of, you know, regress. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, what is, you know, how can I differentiate myself? And you have to then if you can't maintain a kind of humanistic worldview, then you kind of regress, and it's like, okay, well,
it's like me against the world kind of thing.
Right, and you can get all the way down to, so you have to get to the me against the world, you have to regress through it's white people against the world, or white men against the world, and you regress further back in beyond, you know, behind that, and you go
to almost back to beige.
Yeah.
Right?
But as you're going through all that, you're writing in, you know, you're Eric Harris writing in your journal, you know, you're finding out, you know, you're trying to figure out how you might possibly be redeemable. And one of the ways that you might do that is go, well, I'm white. That's true. And maybe white people are better than other people. And so you try and work that out, and you go, yeah, black people suck. You know, and you foam and froth with that. And then that doesn't work out, and you go, okay, well, what do I'm a man. At least I'm a man. Yeah. Women suck. You know, and you foam and froth and try and figure out some way that you are, you know, good enough somehow, or good in some way. And if it doesn't work, right? And that's the problem with this identitarian stuff. Nobody's good enough because of their identity. Right? But like you regress back through all your identities and try and like figure out why there's something that's fundamentally good about you. And, you know, okay, well, I'll shit on women then, and see if I can write down all these things and sort through all the ways that men are better than women, and you know, maybe that will sustain me. And then it won't, you know, because it's not true. But you can grasp at that to try and sustain your sense of identity, you know. So of course, if he's to me, it's like, obviously this kid's collapsing. He's probably going through all of that stuff. Yeah. You know, like trying to figure out what about him might be good. And there's, you know, there's various, you know, immutable characteristics, and we've developed through a system of, you know, kind of cultural worldview development and culturation that, you know, has kind of over the years kind of incorporated that stuff and then transcended it. You know, transcend and include. Yeah. So when you start to regress, you start to go back through all of that stuff as an individual. When you as an individual are collapsing, your psychology works its way backwards through all of that stuff, and you're going to go back to, you know, ethnocentric and nationalist and all this, you know, like dropping down through all those layers of being until it's just, you know, and then eventually you go, well, that, you know, it's all garbage. None of it's real. Right. Yeah. So I don't think anyway.
Let's keep moving.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get back to the browser. But my point was basically that, you know, I don't think that it's dishonest to, you know, not mention that he was racist and misogynistic and homophobic. I think that you would basically expect that of someone who was collapsing into...
Right. They just, like, they had hatred for everything in existence, including themselves and existence itself. Yeah. You know?
I think that you would basically just expect that of someone who's collapsing. Right. So, I don't see that as necessarily
disingenuous or anything. Yeah. So, Sean.
So Peterson has been called a sexist and a misogynist. To be honest, I'm not sure this is fair characterization of his work, but I haven't read his book and I haven't listened to all of his lectures. I'm curious what you think. So, as we've chatted about before, I draw a theoretical distinction in my own work between sexism and misogyny, though they are often tangled up in practice. Peterson's book has numerous sections which I would characterize as sexist because they naturalize and rationalize a patriarchal social order. Can you cite specific passages as evidence of this? Sure, here's a passage that conveys what I'm talking about. So, boys are suffering in the modern world. They are more disobedient negatively or more independent positively than girls, and they suffer for this throughout their pre-university educational career. They are less agreeable, agreeableness being a personality trait associated with compassion, empathy, and avoidance of conflict, and less susceptible to anxiety and depression, at least after both sexes hit puberty. Boys' interest tilt towards things, girls' interest tilt towards people. Strikingly, these differences, strongly influenced by biological factors, are more pronounced in the Scandinavian societies where gender equality has been pushed hardest. This is the opposite of what would be expected by those who insist ever more loudly that gender is a social construct. It isn't. This isn't a debate the data are in. So,
well, let's read what she wants to say about that, because
this is based more on sexist stereotypes than compelling scientific evidence.
He's done the studies. he's aware of the studies that he hasn't done.
So since this article came out in June, a massive international meta-study was published in Science, the premier scientific journal, that points out exactly what Peterson is talking about in
with the Scandinavian countries being more.
Yes, this has been replicated over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The idea, and again, when she says it's based on sexist stereotypes, it's because she's a social constructionist. She's going back to this idea that, you know, that somehow these stereotypes outweigh the scientific data, and it's just false.
Yeah.
So anyway, even the gender progressive environment of Scandinavia that Peterson mentions, it's not as if all sexism and misogyny has been eradicated overnight. Many patriarchal norms linger and are sometimes enforced, or whose breakdown has led to backlash.
Well, again, where's her evidence for that?
Again, the idea that all differences between genders, are that, let's put it this way, let's reverse it. The idea that we would see parity of outcome, equality of outcome, if, you know, everyone had equality of opportunity is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Just flat out wrong. Because if you give everyone equality of opportunity, some people are going to hang out on their couch and talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're doing. Right?
Yeah.
Some people are going to bust their ass 18 hours a day, sleep for, you know, the other 6, and then get right back at it. And they're going to build something amazing in the span of a couple years. And, you know, they're going to do whatever, like, amazing things. That doesn't mean that they had that there was some sort of prejudice or disparity or oppression going on there. It means that one person wanted it more.
There's a difference in interest between genders, between people. And it's not exact. It's not like all men like this better than, and all women like this better. But there are differences. And they're not small.
Population level differences measured at birth.
Yeah.
All right? You can measure the differential, like, attention to faces versus object, right, in the first month of birth.
Is it the first month?
Yeah, within the first month, you can start recognizing the differential, like, girls and boys react to faces differently.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Like, these are not social constructs. And this idea is it's so silly.
It's really misguided, and...
So the other thing is that, you know, if gender norms break down, right, that there's a backlash against that, and that the reason for the backlash is sexism or misogyny, right? Or a desire to oppress. This going back to that same old narrative about how the reason people get upset about the way, the changes is always because there's just this desire to step on people's heads. You know, like I just, as a straight white male, I just want to have my foot on someone's neck.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a negative way of looking at people, first of all. Second of all, it's silly to assume that backlashes are like that all backlashes are because of that. It might be the fact that people are pushing things to happen
now
that are unnatural and oppressive.
Right. There might be a backlash in the
Maybe
case...
the feminist narrative is oppressive.
Right.
And people are reacting to that.
Right. There might be a backlash when in certain companies they're like, well, we need 50% women on our board and 50% men.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if I don't care if the guy seems more qualified, we need 50% women on here.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a backlash when we
might
are
be justifiable.
Right, when we are deciding that no matter what, we're not going to go based on on merit. Mm-hmm. We're going to just decide that we need a certain amount of women and we need a certain amount of people of different descent, than just white.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to allow companies to go based on merit
mm-hmm.
and based on experience.
Mm-hmm.
That I could see there being a backlash to that, because it's like, if you've studied all your life and you've worked hard and you've had experience in a certain position,
mm-hmm.
and then you're trying to get a job and they're like, oh, sorry, you're a straight white male.
Well, here's here's the thing. You can't even do this, and it's stupid to try. Let's say, for example, right? Let's do a little bit of math here. You want to have okay, so let's say black people make up 13% of the U.S. population.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take that.
Yeah.
Well, that means that basically, let's not even get into the non-binary gender stuff,
mm-hmm.
but let's just say, right, that means 6.5% of the population is black women and
mm-hmm.
6.5% of the population is black men.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, let's just say on race and gender, then
mm-hmm.
you got to have at least one black man and one black woman
mm-hmm.
as representative of those two populations,
mm-hmm.
right? On a board.
Right.
Right. Well,
but for some people that's not good enough.
Well, okay, let's just say we've got that.
Okay.
Now Hispanic men,
mm-hmm. Hispanic
women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, where are we going to get an even proportion of, let's say, Hispanic, let's say, I don't know what it is, but I think it might be close to 30%, 20
of the
maybe
U.S.
20%,
population,
something like that.
It might be 25.
Let's say it's 25%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 13. There's no common denominator for 13 and 25.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is, but it's like way up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 13 times 2 is 26.
Mm-hmm.
So in 25, let's say it's 13 and 30%, right? So you've got, now in order to get an even proportion, you're going to have to find out what that common denominator is, and you're going to have to say, okay, well, we've got, now we're going to need, for every Hispanic person, mm-hmm. or for every black person, we need 2 Hispanic people. Let's just mm-hmm. say that, right? So now we've got 2 black women, or we've got 1 black woman, 1 black man. We've got 2 Hispanic women, 2 Hispanic men.
Yeah.
Right. Now we're going to Asian people. Well, Asian people are a much lower percentage of population. Right. Maybe they're 4%.
Yeah.
Well, shit. What are we going to do? We can't have 1/3 of an Asian person. It doesn't work.
See, yeah,
you know what I mean? So now the board keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So now we need at least 1 Asian man and 1 Asian woman, which means we need probably 3 black men and 3 black women, which means we need 6 black men and 6 black women.
It gets crazy real fast.
In order to have some sort of parity, right?
Yeah,
so the board is, and then eventually you're going to have 40% of the board is going to be white, so you're going to have 20, you're probably going to have 80 white men and 80 white women.
So how many people are on this board?
You're going to have a board of 230 people or something. It's going to be massive. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's stupid.
Yeah.
And that's just two, like, it's not even getting into the binary genders, or
Right.
non-binary
Right.
genders, right? So if you got to start including other dimensions of identity, like disabled people, trans people, right?
Yeah.
You,
We're getting off again, I think, but
this so intersectionality is stupid. That's all I'm saying. All right. Based on sexist stereotypes more than compelling scientific evidence.
where are you?
At the top there. And even the gender progressive environment of Scandinavia, okay, it's not all just whatever. Let me go on to the next paragraph. I already read that one. As a result, there is currently no control group of people raised in a truly non-patriarchal culture. It's the best indicator we have in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your hypothetical utopia, okay?
If that could even ever exist.
Right. But it's
pretty damn close.
It's closer to your hypothetical, utopia than Somalia, okay?
Or than really any culture has ever been.
Right. And so you can actually line up, you can stack them up, right? You can say, based on what we call gender equality, based on what this feminist would call, a progressive society, it's more progressive than some others. So it doesn't matter that it's not the utopia, okay? What matters is as you get closer to her idea of a utopian society, the gender differences actually widen.
Yeah.
That's the important part that she's not addressing.
Yeah.
What we need to investigate claims that men naturally prefer masculine coded activities and women naturally prefer feminine coded ones. No, actually, go on. Oh yeah. No, we actually don't need that, and that's what she's missing the point. We actually don't need that utopia, that perfect utopian gender egalitarian society to investigate those claims. We can say there's a gradation between those that are closer to that perfect utopian egalitarian society and those that are absolutely barbaric in their, gender conformity requirements. Okay, their gender role conformity requirements. You can take places where it's, and you can rank them and make a gradation of them, and you can say, well, obviously we're not perfect anywhere yet, okay? But if we posit that this direction is towards perfect, right? And then we rank things that are closer to that direction, and then we track how people sort themselves into various professions, we can find trends. And what do we find? We find that the closer we get to your, utopian ideals of gender egalitarianism, the wider the differences get. That is an actual valid way to measure those differences.
Yeah.
You can't we don't have the perfect society yet, so we can't measure anything. No, that's not true. We actually can, because we can look at, it's like saying we don't have the fastest ever car in the whole world of ever, so we have no idea whether an 8-cylinder engine or a 6-cylinder engine puts out more horsepower. It's like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true. We can look at, we don't have the perfect thing, but we can look at trends.
Right.
Anyway. I also suspect that for many of Peterson's readers, the sexism on display above is one tool among many to make forceful, domineering moves that are typical of misogyny. And I define misogyny as hostility certain women face because they are women in a man's world, rather than the hatred men harbor in their hearts towards all or even most women. Well, at least she's not, specifically saying that men have hatred in their heart towards women.
Yeah.
Certain women face... Which women in particular?
The ones that are in a man's world. The ones that are trying to get to the top. The ones that are trying to be CEOs. The
well,
ones
that's.
are...
I'm sorry, sweetheart. That's not a man's world. A man's world is the sewer. A man's world is the guy getting crushed by logs in the Pacific Northwest. A man's world is, men being swept overboard while they're crab fishing in the Arctic.
But they don't. They always forget about that part of
yeah, a man's world is people collecting trash, and getting run over by cars while they're trying to haul around.
That's blue-collar man's world.
So
they're interested in, the hostility women face when they're trying to be in white-collar man's world.
Yeah. I remember working in the gas field in Wyoming, and there were 2 chicks in the gas field.
Were there?
Yeah.
Oh.
There were 2.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. There were 2 chicks out there. Neither of them worked on my crew, but we worked, on similar crews, or we worked, multiple crews would show up on jobs. So worked with at least one of the girls on a fairly regular basis. And, everyone liked her. Mm-hmm. Everyone was, courteous. Mm-hmm. Everyone tried to help. Mm-hmm. Right? And we didn't, it wasn't like, you can't operate the backhoe because you're a woman. Mm-hmm. Like, there was none of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was,
yeah.
This is...
I mean, obviously, there are some women that probably have faced hostility from men when they're trying to get into certain industries. Yep. And certainly decades ago,
well, here's the thing.
Probably was bad.
Here's the thing, though. Okay, if you're working in the gas field, right, in the middle of Wyoming, in a state with, more antelope than people, literally, the competition isn't very high.
Right.
It's not like
people come from different states to come work in the gas field.
It's not like everyone is competing really hard to work as, a garbage man.
Right.
It's not like there's a ton of competition to
and
be
that's the
a
thing.
Sewer worker.
That's the thing. In the competitive world of certain companies where...
If you want to be the CEO of a company, you have to get your elbows out and start swinging.
And it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man.
Have that.
Right. It doesn't matter if you're a woman and a man in those worlds. There's competition, and people are hostile towards others that are trying to make their way up in the world, whether you're a man or a woman.
You want a position that pays $100 million a year?
Yeah.
Guess what? You're not the only one.
Yeah.
You're going to face some hostility.
Yeah.
Okay?
No kidding.
So if you want to be a CEO or on a corporate board, you're going to face some hostility regardless of your gender. Because... you're not the only one who wants that position. Not even close.
Yeah. No kidding.
You know what I mean? So it's not about like, oh, well, I'm a woman in a man's world. No, men don't want other men to have the position that pays $100 million a year either. They want to be the ones to have that position.
Exactly.
It's not like, oh, well, I'm going to be especially hostile to you because you're a woman. It's like, no, you're just another person who's in my way, and I want to get to that $100 million a year position.
Yeah. To be honest, in companies that I've worked for, the people that I've experienced the most hostility from were other women. I've had, other than, some inappropriate behavior from men sexually, the men that were above me, who were very appropriate, they have been nothing but nice to me when I worked with them. It's the women that were my managers who were hostile,
I've heard that so many times.
I've also had plenty of women that I've worked for that were very nice. Mm-hmm. But the people that have been the most hostile in my work environments have been women.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that so many times from men and women, right? And from when you hear men going, "Oh, it sucks to work for a woman," or that woman is so, she's such a cunt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you hear men doing that, it's easy to just kind of be like, yeah, whatever, dude. You just don't like having a woman in a position of power. But I've heard it from so many women too.
I think some women that get into positions of power feel like they have to be assholes, or that they have to be hard asses, and there's a difference between being strong, confident, assertive, and you can be disciplinary, you can be a strong person without being a total douche,
Well, this is one of the things that I think this feminist professor gets wrong. and that I think a lot of people get wrong. The Gillette ad that came out recently is a good example of this. This idea that, oh, look at the boys, roughhousing. It's like, and this idea that it's this weird thing because it shows kids roughhousing and or kicking the crap out of each other, right?
Yeah, we don't see it long enough to. I don't remember. It didn't. Right. It kind of looked like they were just kind of.
And then there's all these men going, "Boys, we boys, boys, we boys," right? So the feminist perspective is that men don't understand the difference between bullying and roughhousing.
But actually, it's the
other way around.
Yeah, it's the feminists that don't seem to understand.
Men, generally speaking, because young boys are rough and they mess with each other, and like when I was a kid, you could not keep me and my brothers from roughhousing. We were ridiculous. There were 4 of us, and we played football in the hallway, and we were boxing with pillows, and we were just constantly throwing each other all over the place.
Yeah.
Right? So we have because men have more testosterone, okay? This is a fact, okay? At the population level, men tend to be more aggressive and, competitive in their play. We, at a young age, we get this, like, deeply integrated sense of what's too much,
right,
in terms of physicality.
And sometimes you get hurt, or sometimes you accidentally hurt your friend or your brother in your case.
And you feel bad about it, and you go, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry." Like this. But because we're so aggressive and we play that way,
it's a one way to learn,
right? And then we go into grade school and we're wrestling. In high school we're playing football and soccer and we're playing sports with each other. Not that women don't play sports, but that, but men are so much more kind of geared towards roughhousing, right? And physical play like that. That by the time we're adults, we have a very finely honed sense of like what that line is, right? And for a lot of women, it just looks like, oh no, it's aggression.
Right.
And it's all like, it's either not aggression or aggression. And there's no like, but there's a huge gray area of playfulness in there that men just tend to have a better handle on because we do it more. We understand the domain. Yeah. So we roughhouse with each other and we're able to go, oh yeah, they're just playing. And then when we can tell when it's, oh, nope, come on.
Right, they start punching each other in the face.
You can tell. You can tell where the line is, where it's like they're starting to grit their teeth and get really angry. It's like, whoa, slow down, calm down. Relax. But like, it's not that... the fact is boys will be boys. Yeah. And it's not feminists who have bad. There's something good about that. Right. When having that deeply integrated sense of what appropriate, what constitutes appropriate physical competition is really important. Yeah. You don't want a man who's, you want to sort that stuff out when they're kids. Right. You don't want a man who's like in his mid-20s who still doesn't know, how to handle, getting bumped while he's playing basketball. Right. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he goes just out
loses his temper.
You don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think, I don't know, we should probably wrap up pretty soon.
So here we go.
Oh, God.
Misogyny to me is more about policing and controlling women's behavior. Belittling her intellect or acumen in competitive domains is certainly one way of doing that, especially when backed by the sense that it's in her womanly nature to be oriented to people rather than abstractions. But that's a false contrast. You can be both. I don't understand this idea of control. Yeah. This constant accusation of, of this attempt to control.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't see it.
First of all, people try to control the situations that are around them. That just happens. Like, it's not like women don't try to control men.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, you have to be absolutely moronic to think that women don't try to control men's behavior.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Like, our society is definitely set up to control people's behaviors. And that's not a bad thing, for one. So, this obsession with control is kind of ridiculous. Okay? Now, I don't think that there's... Yeah, policing and controlling women's behavior.
And where is she talking about? In the workplace? In the home? What is she even talking about? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. If she's saying that you shouldn't go, ha, you're a woman, so you can't do math. Like, wow, what a revelation. Congratulations. I'm glad you got a degree in that. Like, brilliant. Okay, but, you know, that's, like, who actually thinks that way?
I don't know.
Right?
I mean, okay. I'm sure there was a certain amount of competition when I was young in school with me and other boys. Like, and I'm sure there was a certain amount of kind of, you know, them being like, well, I'm better at this because I'm, you know, a guy or whatever. But I haven't seen it since I was like a kid. You know what I mean? I haven't seen it since I was like young and in school. And there was a certain amount of competition between the sexes in school. And maybe it still happens in the workplace, but I
think that that's something that we kind of, again, I think that we're in a modern culture and it's developmental, right? So like you said, you see that stuff in grade school.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do this because you're a girl.
Yeah.
Right? But that's because kids don't have a sophisticated understanding of gender.
Right.
Right? They don't have a sophisticated understanding.
They don't of anything. Really.
Of anything. They're just trying to get a hold of things, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And so then, you know, they get to a point where they recognize, I mean, almost, I think all people in modern America get to a point where they recognize that those are just limited kind of generalizations that don't work for all situations. And so we develop a certain amount of looseness with those associations. And I think that almost everybody in modern America does that. I don't think that there's a bunch of people who are in their 40s who are still like, women can't do X, Y, or Z because they're women and their stupid women brains can't do it. You know?
I'm sure there's a small percentage of men that think that way, but
like, I'm sure, because you know? there's idiots and you know, there's just like, because people aren't all the same, right? And some people are not awesome, but like,
there's all sorts of people that have stupid ideas.
Yes, right? Like, I'm
sure I have some stupid ideas.
But have had. Like the mainstream, the vast majority of people don't like. I would venture so far as to say that like 90% of the populace, at least, right, in modern America, gets to a point where they recognize that, you know, that girls wear pink isn't true in any real way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so frustrating to try and read through this.
Yeah.
Where are we at? Jesus, we're almost an hour and a half.
Maybe we should pick this up tomorrow or call it good for now.
For endorsing or appearing to endorse enforcement. Can we?
Oh, Jesus. Okay, yeah.
Let's see what she says about the enforced monogamy thing. To be fair, this is a very particular anthropological term that doesn't imply that the government is literally forcing people into monogamous relationships, but instead refers to social policies that incentivize monogamy. What does he actually say about this in the book? He said that subsequently in a New York Times piece, I believe, in response to the point that school shooters are often sexually, romantically, and socially frustrated young men. This suggestion is classic straight-up misogyny according to my definition of it. Okay?
Why? I mean, it goes both ways. It's like in a society that socially enforces monogamy only in the sense that it's like, if you're found to be cheating on your partner, people around you that know about it are like, you're a horrible person, you know, like that's horrible. That's so, like, not cool. But it doesn't matter if you're a woman cheating on your man or a man cheating on your woman. It's like, either way, socially enforced monogamy works for both parties. It's not, how is that misogyny? Because, you know what I'm saying? Like, how is she saying that that's straight up misogyny?
In response to the point that school shooter... So apparently at some point, Peterson said something about school shooters are often sexually, romantically, and socially frustrated young men.
I mean, I agree with that, yeah.
Yes. She's saying that... Okay, so she's saying that I'm trying to, like, steelman this, all right? I think basically what she's saying is that the idea that if we don't live in a society that requires, you know, kind of a 1-to-1 ratio of women to man, you know, woman, like, and monogamy, right? If we don't live in a society that requires that, that men will be violent to kind of react to that and enforce that somehow, right? And that it's kind of a it's so like it's such a, like, it's so weird. I can't even. It's hard for me to think in such a non-sophisticated way. The idea that, like, men are going to, like, that men as a collective are somehow, you know, acting out violently
because women reject them.
Because it's... First of all, men don't really act as collectives in quite the same way that, you know, women do in, you know, like in feminism, for example, right? That's just not the way that things work, partially because patriarchy theory is wrong. Men don't try to oppress women. Men who have been in charge of political systems, by and large, try to take care of the society for the benefit of women and children, for the most part.
Yeah.
Right? This is why, you know, men are kind of legally required to take care of the children. You go as far back as you go. It's like marriage is a way to make sure that the man who is, you know, creates children is responsible for them and the woman that he impregnates. Right? Like that's the requirement. That's what patriarchy is. It's the kind of it's basically the requirement of the man to be responsible for.
Yeah.
Right? So the feminism is this brand new kind of, in the last 100 years or whatever, this concept that the genders are at war somehow, you know, and that one of the genders should act as a coalition against the other is a brand new thing. Yeah. It's like, it's never been the case that, like, gender, like, men as a group were like, ha ha ha, we should oppress the women. Like, that's never been a thing.
Yeah.
So this idea that, like, somehow men are collectively reacting, you know, in some sort of organized way to enforce monogamy through violence, is
asinine?
Specifically against women is asinine, right? Yeah. I think what she's suggesting here by saying that it's a horrible mischaracterization of his position on this.
Yeah.
Right? He's saying that stable societies, one-to-one monogamous relationships make for more stable societies.
Yeah.
And that in societies that are polygamous, right, you have a lot more young male violence. I set this to be
Do not disturb.
do not disturb, but boom.
But now we're gonna be upside down, right?
Yeah, there we go.
How do you do it like this?
There we go. Perfect.
Oh.
Perfect. So, anyway, maybe we should go ahead and leave off and try this again tomorrow.
Yeah.
I need to think about that one because it doesn't even, like, I can't even recognize a legitimate critique of something that Peterson actually thinks in that statement.
Yeah.
There's what Peterson's actually says regarding enforced monogamy is that societies that are polygamous are more violent.
Yeah.
And that's because basically men who have no prospects of, having a family or propagating the genes have nothing to lose, and so they're more desperate, and desperate men do violence. Like that's
desperate people, but yeah, desperate men especially, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, they're less stable societies because there's more desperate men who don't have any family to take care of or any kind of investment.
Right. Men who don't have like a loving partnership die younger.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They get sick easier, they die younger, they're at higher likelihood for having like heart disease and various diseases. So
and I mean, just okay. So look at a society where, you can have polygamy and you've got men that have, 20, 30 wives, multiple wives, and then maybe they've got multiple wives and a whole like harem of concubines, right? And you've got multiple like lords, or whatever. You've got this kind of caste system where there's lots of men near the top that have that kind of thing in varying degrees, right? Well, there's tons and tons of men at the bottom who will never have a wife.
Right.
And they've got nothing to lose.
Unless they can get a wife from one of that guy's daughter, like...
Right, but that's the thing, is that, like, all the women are being passed up to higher status men.
True.
Right? None of the women want to marry someone
But to
who's
me,
at the bottom.
that sounds more like misogyny. It's like a guy that wants to have 20 or plus wives, or even just more than one wife.
Right.
How is that not misogyny?
Right.
The idea of, like, partners having, one-to-one... partnership, to me, that sounds like a better deal for both parties.
It does.
It
does. So, like, yeah, but it just makes sense, and it's it's pretty much non-controversial that those kinds of societies are more violent.
Yeah.
There's lots of young men with no prospects of having a family or. And then the other thing is having a family means I have an investment in my society. I've got kids to raise. I've got people to feed. I've got I've got to do things to help these little,
I want to make sure that the world around us is
stable somehow, right?
And safe and healthy.
Right.
And
I've got something to lose. Look, there's kids.
Yeah.
Right? I've got a wife and I've got kids. There's something.
I want things to be good around us in our community, and
all of a sudden I've got something to lose. There's something of value that I want to protect and and contribute to the stabilization and steadiness of society for. So there's less violence in societies where
the standard, the norm is monogamy. Yeah. So
that seems like it just makes sense.
Pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's not like. It's not like I'm.
It's not like you want to.
It's taking into account the fact that desperate people. Well, okay, so here's another way to look at that, right? In polygamous societies, right? All women are inherently valuable, right? And there's room for almost all women to get kind of taken care of by some wealthy man, whether it's a concubine or a wife or whatever, right? men are inherently disposable. There's no room for them, and so they're desperate, and they're at the bottom, right? The men who get left out of that system, why shouldn't they revolt?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't they try to upset the apple cart and create violence?
I don't know.
From an individual perspective, it's like, oh, I guess nobody wants me. Okay, I'll just walk over here and shoot myself or hang myself, or whatever. Like, what is that? Is that maybe it's an unjust system when, there's huge numbers of men at the bottom who are, left to fend for themselves and nobody's going to take care of them, and pretty much all the women get absorbed into some sort of family structure where they're taken care of.
So, and maybe that's why society around the world has gotten less and less violent over the years, is because most cultures around the world, have stabilized into monogamous. Obviously, we've got Utah, and we've got certain areas where people are polygamous or even polyamorous. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But I mean, society has gotten less and less violent, and it could be due to the fact that predominantly we live in monogamous society.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the other thing, is that maybe truth isn't subjective, right? Maybe it's true that that's a more functional way of living.
Mm-hmm. It's healthier for children.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't give proper care and attention to 5 different partners, let alone more, and then like all the kids you have with all those different people. Like, you might be able to provide for them. You might be a wealthy man that can provide for at least 5 wives and a bunch of kids, but that's not what most people want from their spouse. Most people want care and attention, time spent together, and that's what most children want. Most children, even if they grow up in a wealthy household, they rebel. They hate their parents if their parents are not giving them proper attention and love and care. And
I mean, that's the other thing, is that as societies become more prosperous, right? It's like, okay, we can pretty much get away with the whole like as societies get more prosperous, you get to a situation where even though the wealthiest people, could support many, many multiple wives or whatever, or many, many children, this whole thing, it's like we kind of renegotiate and kind of go, yeah, but I don't really care that much about all the wealth and everything. It's like really, kind of like, a partnership and some stability. Once the basics
see you from time to time, like not just have you be working at the office 80 to 100 hours a week, just so you can bring me lots of money.
once the basics are covered, right? Most people kind of settle into like, oh, okay, well, I mean, I'm not dying, I'm not struggling to feed myself. So what's important beyond that? And it becomes personal relationships and meaning, and it's like all of a sudden, the one-on-one is really important because you can get so deep in that.
Right. Yeah.
So. Yeah.
On that note, maybe we should
switch it. We should switch it off for the day. This is hard to get through.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this tomorrow, I think.
Maybe.
We'll give this another shot.
Thanks for watching if you've kept with us this whole time.
All right, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. Have a good morning whenever you're watching this. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook at Just Us Chatting. Thinking about putting together a website. We'll see what happens. And of course, like and follow our channel, subscribe, and smash that thumbs up. And we'll see you next time.